On November 4th of 2025, a new political star rose to power in New York City, United States of America. Almost immediately, he was labeled Ramblin' Ma'am. Zoran spews word salad, empty promises, and vague proposals. Frosty the Zomam, whatever that means, and No Fun Zoran enforcing kids to attend school no matter what. And finally, Man Child, a Nepo baby who's running New York City. Now, I want to ask all of the students and kids in the audience, if one day you get a leader that tells you to go to school no matter what will you think? I think the answer is, I hate that person. And if, to all the adults, one day you hear that your city is ran by someone who got into power because of nepotism, what will you think? Most likely, negatively. This man, his name is Zoran Mamdani, and this is his first time assuming top office in politics. Yet before most people ever heard him speak, before most people ever saw his policies, and before anyone could see his ideas in action, these words already shaped their perception of him. And in his victory speech, Mamdani said something about the Western and US politics. He said that we won because we insisted that no longer would politics be something that is done to us. Now, it is something that we do. Now, many of us here, actually everyone in society nowadays, eventually lives under somewhat of an influence from Western media. But also, many of us here in the future would probably pursue education in a Western background. So, understanding what Mamdani is trying to say here is pretty important to us. So, what does he mean? Well, what he means is simple. That in this present digitized age, social advocacy too often feels like something that we passively receive. That under the Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden administrations, advocacy isn't something we make anymore. It's not something we vote in anymore. It's not something that we authorize anymore. It is something that is delivered to us through foreign news headlines, through tags, through labels, and through algorithms. Because in this modern world, language doesn't just shape reality, it constructs it. And because in this digitized world, language has unfortunately evolved from a tool of communication into a tool of confusion. Not because of any one single stakeholder, but because of everybody. The advocates, the algorithms, and average citizens like you and I have collectively evolved to survive in a digitized environment that prioritizes confusion and simplicity over proper advocacy. But if language has shifted that direction, it can also turn its head around. By learning how to analyze language, we can bring back the independence of thought and one day take social advocacy into our hands once again. Before everything, let's talk about what this metamorphosis of political language and language in general really looks like. I want to first by pointing out how language has always been one of humanity's greatest inventions of all time. It allowed us to communicate. It allowed us to express ideas greater than ourselves. And it allowed us to form the civilization in which we live in. But language doesn't just stop there. Language is also a tool of protection, a tool of persuasion, and unfortunately, in the modern world, a tool of bias. If you look to some of the oldest political texts in human history, you'll notice something interesting. Whether it's the Declaration of Independence, or the Gettysburg Address, or if it is John Locke's two treatises of the government, you'll start to realize that they use clear words, and their meaning is distinct. That when Abraham Lincoln said, government of the people, by the people, and for the people, he did not hide his meaning behind abstractions. His words were precise, and exactly because they were precise, they were powerful. Contrast that with much of today's political language and language in general. George Orwell, in his famous essay, Politics and the English Language, once outlined how, in our present day, language is often used to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind. That was when he was describing public messaging in the United States government after the Second World War. Nowadays, his warning has only become more relevant. Take, for instance, the phrase collateral damage. It sounds technical, sterile, almost harmless. But in the United States military briefings in 1991 during the Gulf War, those reports used these words, collateral damage, to describe civilian deaths as a consequence of bombing campaigns. There were no families killed. There were no homes torn apart. There was only collateral damage. All of this became masked under the two cold words. Then let's look at enhanced interrogation techniques. In 2002, the CIA officially authorized practices including stress positions, sleep deprivation, and waterboarding under this tag. But these practices are the exact ones that the United States themselves prosecuted after the Second World War as human rights abuses and torture. It is far easier to justify enhanced interrogation than to say, we tortured people. Finally, take the example of precision strikes or surgical strikes. The precise and accurate connotation behind the word surgical makes us think these strikes are probably not that much, right? All they do is they come in, take out one target precisely, and voila, that's it. There's not going to be additional harm, not going to be additional casualties, just the one person that should be killed. But in practice, these strikes are everything but harmless. The New York Times investigated in 2021 found that during the war against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, what the US-led coalition described as precise air campaigns in fact resulted in thousands of underdocumented and underreported civilian deaths. That errors, faults in intelligence, and irrational decisions are all masked under this one word of precision. These phrases do not change reality. They do not reform how reality really looks like, but rather they reframe it. Just enough to be accepted, just enough to be justified, and just enough to be ignored. But this transformation did not just happen overnight. We did not suddenly grow to be dishonest over one night. Instead, this is a process and an evolution that happened because our modern language evolved to survive in a digitized world. Nowadays, people of our generation face more information in a single day than was past generations faced in months. Social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter use algorithms that are targeted at maximizing engagement. And as the proceedings of the National Academy of Science found in 2021, those algorithms are prone to creating echo chambers, spaces where people who are like-minded echo their voices with each other and eventually creating even more emotionally charged ideas. But then, activists and politicians face an impossible challenge. They ought to speak to millions of the audiences that they have, coming from diverse ethnic backgrounds, educational histories, and diverse personal opinions, in just 30-second clips that will go viral on social media platforms and will have to survive thousands of hostile comments. Under these environments, responsibility hiding, as well as oversimplified language survives. Proper nuance and complexity are too dangerous and too slow. In the end, emotional abstraction wins. Let's take a look at the phrase, defund the police in the United States of America. This phrase started as a movement that encompassed a lot of complexity. It was about reallocating public budget that used to be in the policing system into other areas of public service, such as infrastructure, healthcare, or education. It was a policy action that was properly nuanced and advanced. But such complexities did not survive on social media. On social media, this was too complicated, and hence people simplified it into 3 simple words: defund the police. Now, this drastically shifted the way people interpreted the message, because algorithms on social media began amplifying this message more and more as people engage with it more. News outlets began sharing and reusing this phrase over and over again as politicians like Donald Trump and other Congress representatives began reacting to it as well. And over time, people interpreted this message differently. No longer is it something that prioritized public safety and welfare for all, but rather some interpret it as the complete abolition of the policing system, while others saw it as a threat to their security and their defense. At the end of the day, this wasn't caused by any one person. The politicians were forced to react to what the algorithm prioritized. The algorithm prioritized what the consumers saw, and the consumers reacted to the information they consume. That comes from the algorithm and from the activists. In the end of the day, this creates a negative feedback loop. Those activists are forced day after day to use more and more emotionally charged and simplified language because that's the only thing the public accepts. Algorithms learn that those language are exactly what the public, quote unquote, wants, and hence amplifies it even more. And the public, overwhelmed by information and fear, choose to shut themselves out from proper nuancing. And that is how language has evolved in our current world. Not towards clarity, but towards confusion. But evolution isn't one-sided. Evolution can also turn around. If words have evolved because we ought to adapt to a society that prioritizes digitization and simplicity, we can again adapt and make our language clear, specifically through education and through rhetorical education. Now, rhetorics is often misunderstood as persuasion or as just manipulation, because you would often think that using fancy words to get the public to believe in what you say probably sounds like you're trying to control somebody. But in practice, that's not the case. Rhetorics is just the study of language and how we use words. And by studying rhetorics, we learn to analyze word choice, to analyze rhetorical devices, to analyze phrasing. And in the end, it teaches us to analyze critically and not react emotionally. When you start to learn the art of rhetorics, you find something surprising, that words start losing their automatic power over you. That you don't just automatically react emotionally, but rather you analyze critically. That you start to see euphemism when they are there. And you start to peer past the hidden responsibilities when people try to hide it in words. And lucky for us nowadays, these training methods and this type of education has never been more accessible. Schools teach speech and debate. Here in BASIS Hangzhou, we've got a massive network of speech and debate participants. That we have BASIS network tournaments that allows us to put rhetorics into practice on a monthly basis. On online platforms, you see videos, heck, even one from TEDx themselves, the ones running this tournament, the one running this event, teaching you how to understand rhetorics. In our day-to-day community, you have institutes like Dialogy, who actually, the founder of them here, Dr. Peterson, who will be giving a speech later today as well, who teaches you how to analyze rhetorics through classroom environments. As more people start to learn about rhetorics, something changes. The feedback loop starts breaking apart. Politicians are no longer using these emotionally charged language because they know the public doesn't respond well to it. Algorithms no longer amplify such language because people don't like it. And us, individual citizens, begin to question those words that we see, begin to try to analyze the subtlety behind every word used. And slowly, we break such detrimental cycle. The world we live in today, distrustful, chaotic, and then sometimes violent, is shaped in part by the words we've chosen. But if the evolution was caused by those words, our words is the solution to those problems. By learning how to analyze language critically, and by understanding rhetorics, we are the solution to the confused language we live in today. And that change starts with the next words you and I use. Thank you.